How I got my job at Old Stone Bank. This goes back to the year 1948. I had recently gotten out of the Army and I went back to the Providence Journal where I worked before I went into service and where I met Mom. I met Mom in 1945, shortly after I graduated from high school and went to work at the Journal. Mom was working at the Journal at that time. I went to work in the treasurer's office. Mom was working upstairs in the newsroom. Well, when I went back to the Providence Journal after I got out of the service, the two of us realized that it was an uncomfortable situation with the both of us working at the same place. I was going pretty steady with Mom. She was about to become engaged and we had talked about getting married, but the situation became uncomfortable because if someone saw Mom talking to a boy, they would come and run to me and tell me that they saw Mom talking to a boy. Or if I was talking to a girl, they would run to Mom and said that Donald was talking to a girl. So it really wasn't working out. So the both of us agreed that one of us should probably look for another job. Well, it really didn't matter with me, but it did matter to Mom because she came from a Journal family. Her father was a long-term employer at the Providence Journal, and Mom had worked there for a while. I had really no ties to the Journal, so we decided that probably it would be best if I went looking for another job. Well, I really didn't feel it was necessary to rush looking for another job, so I took my time. But one day, as I was walking on my lunch hour, which I frequently did, I happened to walk past this beautiful bank with a great big gold dome on top. It was noted for its gold dome, and it was known all over the city of Providence as the Gold Dome Bank. But it was officially called Old Stone Bank. It intrigued me, so I walked inside the bank and I started to look around at this massive gold dome above me. And I looked all around at the beautiful pictures on the wall. And as I was doing this, a man came out of one of the 3 offices that was located on the ground floor of the bank. And he came up to me and he said to me, "Can I help you?" I said, "No, not really." I said, "I just walked past your bank and I was really taken in by the gold dome, so I decided to come in your bank and take a look around." And he said, "By the way," he said, "you don't happen to be looking for a job, do you?" I said, "No, not really." He said, "Are you a veteran?" I said, "Oh, yes." He said, "Oh, that's fine." He said, "Because we have plenty of openings for young men to join the bank who have been in service and won't be subject to being called into the Army." I said, "Well, no, I'm not really looking for a job." He said to me, "Well, why don't you come in the office and let me get a little information on you. In case you decide sometime that you might like to get into banking, I'll have a little information on you." I said, "No, I really I really don't want to do that. I said, I don't have much time. I'm on my lunch hour. He said, well, come on into the office anyways and let's talk. So I guess to humor him a little, I went into the office and sat down. So he said, what's your name? He said, what's your full name? And he took out a pad and a pencil. And I said to him, my full name? My middle name you want too? He said, yes. I said, well, my name is Donald Leffingwell Benson. And when I said my middle name, Leffingwell, I saw his eyes kind of roll back. As it turned out, and he didn't tell me then, but he told me later on, the minute I said Leffingwell, he knew my uncle, Charlie Leffingwell, very well. They were Masonic buddies. And I didn't know it at that time, but the minute I left that office, he called my uncle on the phone and wanted a rundown on me. I guess he was interested in me. He liked what I told him. And I guess my uncle must have just given him a glowing report of me because my uncle thought I could do nothing wrong. But I gave him some information. I gave him my name and my address. And he said, what's your telephone number? I said, well, we don't have a telephone. We've never had a telephone. I said, if somebody wants to get a message to me, I said, there's a neighbor good enough that will take the message and come over to the house and tell me or whoever the message is for, and then we'll call them back. He said, okay. He said, will you tell me where you presently work? And I said, I work at the Providence Journal. He said, do you like your job? I said, well, I like the job, but I said, unfortunately, because my soon-to-be fiance works there with me, I said it's becoming a very uncomfortable situation because if someone sees my fiance talking to a boy, they go running right to me to tell me, or if someone sees me talking to a girl, they run right to my fiance to tell her. And I said, that's not a good situation. And I said, we've talked it over, and I've decided that I will go and look for a job. He said, boy, he said, I think this would be an ideal job for you. He said, what do you do at the Journal? I said, well, I work in the treasurer's office. I handle financial records. I handle the mail. I said, they're kind of teaching me the job so that I would probably get to be more valuable for them in the treasurer's office. He said, well, I think you have the background for a banking job. He said, are you a high school graduate? I said, yes. He said, have you had any college experience? I said, no. I said, I just got out of the service. He says, well, you know, you can go to school under the GI Bill. I said, yeah, I know that. He said, I still think this would be ideal for you. He said, why don't you try to think a little bit more about it? He said, why don't you think about taking the job on a basis where if you don't like it, you can always come to me and tell me you don't like the job. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. He said, on the other hand, if we don't think it's going to work out with you, we'll tell you the same thing. I said, well, no, not really. I said, I don't want to lead you on. I'm just not that interested. So I left and I went back to work. And when I got home that evening, my mother said to me, Donald, she said, did you apply for a job at Old Stone Bank? I said, no. I said, but I did go into Old Stone because I said I was walking down through the city on my lunch hour and I saw this beautiful bank and I just went in to look around. And I said, some man came out and offered me a job, but I told him I wasn't interested. She said, well, did you give him any information on you? Did you give him your name? And I said, yeah, I gave him all that. She said, well, he called and he wants you to come in again and talk again about taking a job at the bank. And I said, oh, I said, I'm not interested. I said, I'll just forget about it. She said, no, that's not fair. She said, at least you should go back in again and tell them that you're not interested. So I said, well, I'll think about it. So a couple of days later, after I talked it over with Mom, and I said, well, at least I'll go back in and tell them I'm not interested and please don't call me again. So I went in, sat down with him again. And after listening to him, and he said, I really think you should take this job. And I knew I had to leave the Journal anyways, and I said, well, I'll think about taking it for a trial period. If I don't like it, I'll tell you, and then I'll go and find something else. So I went back and I talked to Mom, and she said, well, if you want to take it on a part-time basis, go ahead. And if you don't like it, you can always leave and find something else. She said, but you got to be honest with the Journal. So I gave mine 2 weeks notice, and I started in under those circumstances that I would take it for a while. If I didn't like it, I would tell them and then go look for something else. Well, that temporary job lasted 40 years. And in the time that I worked at Old Stone, I worked in just about every branch of the bank. I opened up new branches. I worked in the bookkeeping department. I worked in the financial end. And in the last 15 years, I worked in the mortgage department. I really loved that job because I got to work with young people. I got to service young people in their mortgage needs, and I really enjoyed it. But after 40 years, I was tired, and I had thoughts about retiring. Well, the bank came to me, and they made me an offer that I really couldn't resist. They agreed to pay me full pay for 3 years. I would leave at that point, wait 3 years, and at that time I would become 62 years of age, and I would be available at that time for early Social Security and my pension. So I decided that I would never get another opportunity, so that's what I did. I retired at that early age, and I was paid for 3 years, and at that time, after the 3 years, I was officially retired on my pension and on my Social Security. And that is the story of my 40 years at Old Stone, and how I never really wanted to be a banker, but I took the job on a temporary basis, and I stayed for 40 years.
I was working at the Providence Journal. I was a copy girl, which is waiting on the men and women in the office or running to meet buses and one thing and another. And I got onto the elevator to do something or other, and Dad was on it. And the elevator operator introduced us, and then I got off to go wherever I was going. And shortly afterwards, after he got off and I got back on to go back upstairs, the elevator operator told me that he had said I was the girl he was going to marry someday.
So what happened after she got off the elevator the first
I
time?
have a little different version of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
my version is basically the same, but a little different. I went to the Journal shortly after I graduated from high school in 1945. And I remember I was in the treasurer's office and I had to deliver mail to every department in the Journal. So I was constantly roaming around the Journal, visiting the different offices, delivering mail. Well, I remember, it's vivid in my mind, that I was waiting to go up to the third floor of the Journal, and all of a sudden the elevator door opened up and Mom came out. She was coming down to the floor that I was on, and we literally bumped into each other. And the elevator operator, who was Swedish, by the way, thought the world of me because I was a Swedish boy. And when I got onto the elevator, I asked the elevator operator, whose name was Ethel Anderson. I knew she was Swedish. I said, "Who was that?" And she said, "Oh, that was little Jeannie Nealand." And I said, "Oh, where does little Jeannie Nealand work?" And Ethel Anderson said, "Jeannie is a copy girl and works in the newsroom upstairs." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting, because that's the girl I'm gonna marry." That's my recollection of the event. But anyways, we literally bumped into each other in the Journal in 1945, and that's where we met.
We did meet. I don't remember bumping into you, literally.
What do you remember about the first time you went out?
First time we went out in each other's company, I wasn't with him. I invited him to a party we were having, and we had an extra girl, so we needed another guy. And so I invited him. He thought he was going with me, but he wasn't. He was going with the other girl. And I don't know, I guess we went out once before he went in the service. Oh, somebody invited me for his going away party. And then I realized there was a little more to him than I had originally thought.
But I wrote to Mom practically every day that I was in service.
And he stole my picture out of the yearbook at the Journal Library and had it blown up. And he had it at his bunk, and someone across from him said, "I went to school with that girl. I graduated with her." I didn't know him, but everybody knew me.
When I went back to the Journal after I got out of the service is when we really started to go on a steady basis. We had a few dates, I can remember, before I went into the service, but
The first time he asked me out, he stood me up.
well,
That's why I got even with him and married him.
I don't quite remember that,
Yes, you
but
didn't
Mom
have a
said,
phone.
well, that's right. We didn't have a phone. We were too poor to have a phone. But I don't remember that, but I was supposed to, I guess, call Mom and give her the details, and I don't remember, but she said I never called, so apparently there was a
We had
miscommunication at that time. She said we had a date. I don't remember it, but she didn't say no when I asked her for the second date.